Good morning, everyone. Today, I would like to talk about the history of Buddhism, especially the Nikaya or the sects in the ancient time that developed to the Mahayana and Theravada tradition. The emergence of Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism that has been asked so many times during the seminar or to give them a talk to the Westerner or the one who is not familiar with Buddhism. Even though the Buddhists are not familiar or understand how this happens in the past or in the ancient time, with the passage of the time, there arose certain developments within the Buddhist order that finally led to the formation of different sects. The Mahasankhikas came into existence toward the end of the first century after the Buddha's death. The other major school which claimed to be orthodox and or conservative way of practice later on became known as the Theravada tradition. The schools of Mahasankhikas was later called Mahayana, or the Great Vehicle. Out of these two sects, 18 schools has involved. By the time Soka was the crowned emperor of Magadha. Most of these most short-lived, and finally only the two schools, Theravada and Mahayana, survived and prospered. Although they were again divided into numerous subsects in later times, it was the latter that was due to cause introduced into Tibet, acquiring its own distinct flavor and characteristics as the Vajrayana school or Lama traditions. Questions are often asked as differences between the two major traditions. To be sure, most of the differences are rather superficial and can be observed in the way monks put on the monastic garments, the way ceremonies are conducted, and language used to record the Buddha's teachings. Theravada adheres to the original Pali, while Mahayana used Sanskrit language. And all those cultural elements that have come to be associated the Bodhisattva idea through accepted and taught in Theravada tradition are much more strongly emphasized in the Mahayana system that are considered central of their religious practice. But generally speaking, both Theravada and Mahayana traditions have more things in common than meet the eye, especially from the doctrinal perspective. Both agree on the teachings which are fundamental in the Buddhist system, such as the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and 10 Perfections, 6 in Mahayana, and 4 Foundations of Mindfulness, the 12 Links of Dependent Origination, the Law of Conditionality, and Natures of Enlightenment, Nibbana as the summum bonum of religious training. The doctrine of karma and rebirth both accept the role of compassionate and wisdom as crucial in any aspiration to enlightenment. Both uphold the cultivation of just virtues as kindness, gratitude, respect to elders, humility, altruism, generosity, morality, mindfulness, non-attachment, universal compassion, and so forth. It is, therefore, proper to include that all the different schools of Buddhism uniformly correspond with one another in essentials, doctrine, objectives, practice, and goals. Theravada Buddhism flourished in southern countries such as Sri Lanka, Myanmar or Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, while the Mahayana school spread northward to Nepal, China, Tibet, Mongolia, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. The former is thus sometimes referred to the Southern School, and the latter as the Northern School. Tibetan Vajrayana is currently so widespread in the West, that is, has come to be recognized in the Old Rite as a separate denomination distinct from Mahayana, to which it was earlier closely affiliated. So now we're talking about the Buddhism in Thailand, how it started and how long it started from the history based on the historical background. Buddhism was introduced into Thailand some 23 centuries ago, when the region was still populated by Mon and Lawas. Nakhon Pathom was then the administrative center, and after the advent of the religion became an active seat of Buddhist propagation. Later, the region was occupied by the Thais, also followers of Buddhism. Khun Luang Maut, who rules over the Ai Lao kingdom about 2,000 years ago, was the first Thai Buddhist king and the professed upholder of the religion. So Khun Luang Maut is ruled the regions in the southern of China, nowadays in Yunnan province of China. Mahayana Buddhism spread to Thailand in 9th century during the reign of the Srivichaya kings, who ruled from Sumatra and whose territory extended over some southern provinces of Thailand. Meanwhile, the Khmer authority and influence also spread over the whole of central and northeastern Thailand. The Khmer kings were adherents of Mahayana Buddhism, which has by then absorbed much of the Brahmanic elements into its system. It was around this time that Mahayana Buddhism and Brahmanism began to exert deep influences into Thai culture. Although neither of them came to replace Theravada Buddhism, their cultural influences were considerable and can be readily observed even today. Another stream of cultural and religious influences began to flow into Thailand from Myanmar or Burma around the 11th century, when King Anuruddha ascended the Myanmar throne. His territorial conquest stretched as far as the Thai kingdoms of Lana and Lanchang in Laos nowadays. Another form of Theravada Buddhism called Pukam or Pakan Buddhism, which was practiced by the Myanmar people, spread into the land following the declines of Khmer and Myanmar influences. There emerged in 13th century the kingdom of Lana in the north and Sukhothai in north-central Thailand. At the height of its glory, Lana became an important seat of Buddhist learning, where numerous scholarly works in Pali were produced. The most famous king of Sukhothai was Ramkhamhaeng the Great, who unified the Thai people under the single rule and whose territories extended far and wide. He strongly supported the form of Theravada Buddhism prevalent in Sri Lanka, which by then had spread to Thailand Following a general reform under the auspices of King Paragamapahu the Great, Lanka Buddhism, as it was called, became highly popular in Thailand and virtually replaced other forms of Buddhism in the country. It is the form of Buddhism preserved and practiced in the present time. Later, during the Ayutthaya period, when the religious condition in Sri Lanka deteriorated so much that not a single monk could be found on the island, Thailand had the opportunity to more than repay this spiritual debt. A delegation of monks headed by Venerable Upali was dispatched to Sri Lanka to help rebuild the monastic order in that country. The ecclesiastical lineage, so re-established, became known as the Siam sect, the country's largest denomination today. Thus, the history of Thai Buddhism may be divided into 4 periods. The first was Theravada Buddhism, as introduced by Asoka Mission. Second was Mahayana Buddhism under the Sivijaya and Khmer influences. The third was Pagan Buddhism or Pukam Buddhism, introduced from Myanmar, and the fourth, Theravada Buddhism from Sri Lanka. That's all the information or the documentary that you can learn from my talk today. And I hope that you can gain the benefit from this history of Buddhism in Thailand. Thank you very much for your attention and watching today. Buddha bless you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Today I would like to talk about the history of